Part 4. We moved closer and I told her my plan. She didn't know who I wanted to go see, but when she found out that I needed to shift and go see a male wolf, she bounced. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, silly?" she exclaimed. "Now, your plan sucks. Let's see if we can refine it." My eyes widened and I sat on my hamper while she paced and thought. Finally, she smiled at me. I flinched at the look in her eyes, but then she stalked towards me and whispered. I had to admit, I was a little in awe of her afterwards. I wouldn't have been able to think of something like that. She was very good at being very bad. We walked back out into my room, and Michaud turned, giving us a strange look. I shrugged, then covered another yawn. This one was fake. I was too pumped to be tired now. This had to work. Jonathan had taken my phone with him, so he couldn't call. Elisa was leaving tomorrow. It had to work. We walked over and sat on my bed. I could feel Michael's stare, wondering what was going on. Elisa smiled at me. "It was wonderful, Reina. I'm sorry I keep talking about it, but I needed another female to share it with." I rolled my eyes and leaned back on my pillows. "You've told me this already," I moaned. She clasped her hands to her chest. "I know, but really, what was it like the first time Jonathan kissed you? You understand what I'm talking about." With that, Michael quickly walked out into the hallway and shut the door. I stared at it. Was it really that easy? She grinned. "See? Sometimes the simplest plans are the best." My plan had been for her to trip the alarm somewhere else in the manor so I could sneak out. But this? Really? I smiled, and she kept talking, going on about Taryn's soft lips and the way he held her. All the while, she moved off the bed and walked towards my window. The alarm was rarely set on this one. It was the one that Track had always used to come into my room at night. She waved me over and I climbed off my bed. I checked the control panel and nodded. She flipped the latch and slid the window open. Then we heard it. A very faint beeping and a door handle to my room turned. She grabbed my arm and yanked me down to my knees with a thud. She did the same and leaned on the window ledge, glaring at me to do the same. "Oh, Reina, I really think I'm falling in love with Taryn," she sighed as my door was flung open. We both turned and Michael walked over. Elisa glanced up at him, her lower lip pouting. "He said he would come back and visit me." She let her lower lip quiver just a little. "Do you think he meant it, Michael?" When my bodyguard blinked, she turned, staying on her knees. "You're a male. Please. I just want to know if he really meant it. He wasn't just saying that, was he?" Michael's usual stone face panicked. He turned towards the door, putting a hand up when Martin walked in. He looked back at me. "That window needs to be shut." She gave a theatrical sigh. "Okay, I'm sorry. Looking over the grounds, talking to Reina helps a little." She looked out the window and whimpered. "He took me for a walk out there." She even pointed. "He kissed me right next to that tree." Michael looked at me and I shrugged and rolled my eyes. He glanced outside the window, even looked down, then he nodded. "A few minutes," was all he said. She gasped and smiled. "Thank you, Michael." When he turned, she called out to him, "Will you stay, please?" He looked back at us, his eyes wide, and she shrugged. "I'd really like your opinion on this," she sighed. He left the room and shut the doors. I sat stunned. She winked at me and then gestured to the open window as if to say, "See what my magical powers can get you?" I mouthed a thank you, and she started to talk as if we were both still sitting there. I climbed out the window easily and shimmied down the pole the Track used to climb up. She leaned over the window and waved, her lips still moving. I had no idea how long her absurd hoax would last, so I bent low and hurried to some bushes. I stripped and curled up, pulling that thing out that I had suppressed. It hurt bad, but I quickly stepped out of the pain so I wouldn't scream. Even then, it was hard. Track had said this would happen, but the pain was so extreme, I could feel it even in my safe place. Don't hurt them. Let them hear me. Don't let the sun hurt. I started my mantra and added the last part in fear that I might get stuck out there longer than I wanted to. The white-hot pain seeped into my safe place and stabbed at me. I clenched my teeth and focused on my mantra. Finally it slowed and then faded. I opened my eyes and almost barked in relief. I jumped up and shook myself hard. Then I lifted my nose and headed towards the forest that lay between the manor and Polson. I had to slow to a trot in a few places where the bushes were sparse. I kept my head low and my feet light. At one point I had to duck into a bush and watch as vampire guards walked a dozen yards away. I was sure, unless they had my keen nose, they wouldn't smell me, but my heart pounded fast and I worried they might hear that. When they were far enough away, I crept out and scurried further from the manor. It seemed to take forever, but finally I reached the edge of the forest. I gave a triumphant growl, leapt, and then ran hard and fast, letting my nose tell me which way to go. The forest was dark, and the smells swam around me, but the scent of my pack was here, and I knew these woods. I ran faster, jumping over tree roots and maneuvering between bushes and downed trees. The smells were exciting, and my muscles were thrilled with the release. I lowered my head and ran faster, feeling the power in my wolf form. The wind whipped at my fur and cooled me as I pounded the ground under me. Suddenly, a smell hit me and I slid to a halt, my chest heaving. I lifted my nose and inhaled, then turned and followed it. I arrived at the den a few minutes later and sat at the entrance, looking into the darkness. I had come here a few times, but it had been a very long time ago. I sniffed the air and my tail slapped the dried leaves on the ground. The pack's scent was strong here. They must have been here recently, I thought, and took a few steps inside. I sniffed the ground, enjoying the familiar smells and feelings that they brought with them. Then I stiffened, with one paw off the ground. I tilted my head and sniffed again, then snorted. There was another scent here, oddly familiar, but I couldn't place it. I put my nose to the ground and followed it to the nest. It was several days old, but I couldn't shake that feeling I knew it. Then I caught a smell that reminded me what I was doing. Phil, I thought, and turned, running back out of the cave. As I got closer to the edge of the forest, I made sure to stay in the shadows and keep quiet. The pack didn't have regular guards out here, but still, any of them could be running here. I slowed to a walk when I could see the tree line ahead. It wasn't until then I realized I had no idea where Phil might be. I knew where he lived, so I decided I would check there first. If I could keep to the shadows, I should be able to get there without being spotted. Just as I was about to the edge of the forest line, I heard a commotion up ahead. I dove into a thick brush, ignoring the pricks from the barbs, and flattened myself. I heard barking and human voices as well, and they were headed this way. I sighed. I guess Elisa's charade couldn't last forever. Sure enough, a group of wolves came running up. I watched them through the thorn bush and was relieved to see them rush past me. There were others on foot that came up after. I saw Rock there and felt a small pang of guilt as he and the others ran after the wolves. I knew my scent would be picked up quickly, so as soon as they were out of sight, I ran. Then I remembered what Ryan told me I had done before. I altered my course a little and headed towards the lake. I dove in quickly, then realized the sound the splash made. I looked around as I paddled to the other side, watching for anyone that might have heard, but no one came. When I got out on the other side, I stepped out, shook hard, and then ran again. Phil's house was at the far end of town. Wouldn't that just figure? But I actually made it there without anyone seeing me. Ducking behind houses, cars, and garbage can seem slow, but so far I wasn't being followed. I made it to his backyard and then sighed. Now what? I thought, looking up at the 2-story building. I couldn't just walk up and knock, especially if he didn't want to see me. I moved closer, lifting my nose, hoping to catch his scent. I was sniffing near the back door when a sensation crashed into my mind. I dropped to my belly and whimpered. Great. Ryan. Only my eyes moved as I waited. They had found me. Not physically, but mentally. Somehow they were close enough and Ryan was able to cow me. I couldn't move if I wanted to. Then it came again. Where are you? Came the thoughts that were not words, but I could feel the anger in them, and my body shivered. I let my eyes look up at the house, and that was enough. The air around me filled with howls as they spread the word. Ryan, being the main alpha, could mentally communicate with all the cliques. The clique alphas had the same ability with other clique leaders. The rest of us were mostly limited to our cliques and the alphas. I say mostly because it can change, but that really wasn't the point at this moment. Ryan was ticked at me, and they were on their way. I was able to crawl a few feet, but the power that he had forced me back down. I grunted and gave up, waiting for them to find me. A dark brown wolf and a lighter, massive one were the first ones into the yard. Great. Jackson and Track. I was able to lift my head a little and watch them charge towards me. I flinched as they slammed to a halt in front of me. Track's muzzle came down, his teeth bared, telling me off, wolf style. I lowered my head again, looking away. No point arguing. I was in big trouble. The others showed up quickly and surrounded me. Some barked, some growled, but Track snapped back at them if they came too close. Nice. He wanted to be the one to kick my butt. I sighed and kept my nose between my front paws, not looking up. Then I saw a massive set of ashen paws walk towards me, and I swallowed hard. I tried to sink further into the ground. Unfortunately, that was impossible. Ryan growled over my head, gave a few soft barks, and I heard some of the wolves leaving. Well, at least there wouldn't be as many witnesses. What were you thinking? Came Ryan's thoughts. She wasn't thinking, Track replied, his growl deep and his thoughts filled with frustration. That was a very stupid thing to do, Ryan snapped. I gave a small whimper, and he lowered his muzzle and growled softly. Whimpering stopped. I laid there, breathing in the dirt, while he paced and lectured me. Track threw in comments on occasion, but finally Ryan silenced him. I didn't move. I watched his large paws pace, stop, and pace again. Why weren't there teeth deep in the back of my neck? I didn't know. That's usually what happened. Did that make this better or worse? I wasn't sure. Sit up. I sat up, but kept my head down low and my ears dipped forward. Ryan's muzzle appeared alongside of my own. His teeth were bared, and he growled long and low. I shivered. I knew he wouldn't severely injure me, but beat some sense into me, well, that was completely probable. The growl got deeper, and I bent my neck, lowering it under his. He snapped at me and pushed my head away with his own. Great. Sucking up was not going to be easy either. Then he circled me. I gave a yelp when he nipped my back leg, and I turned and tucked it under me. When he came around the other side, he stopped, his teeth so close I could see his gums. He circled again. All the while the images flashed in my mind, telling me what could have happened to me, how I had no sense. The list went on and on. I guess I seemed too indifferent at one point, because his teeth found my backside again. I cried out loudly that time and scooted away, or tried to. When I moved, his teeth finally clamped on the back of my neck and pushed my head down. Once again, I was flat on my stomach. Just then I heard something that made my ears perk up. It was a sound, a voice, and it wasn't that far away. I looked at the house and cried out again as my movement made Ryan's teeth tear into my skin. He growled hard and I froze, but kept my ears forward, my eyes searching. I heard the sound again. "Take care of that," I heard Ryan's thoughts yell. My brows dipped as the sensations and images swam through me. Was that fear? What could be in there that he could fear? Anger outweighed it as he growled, and then I heard footsteps running towards us. I flinched, but they clomped down on my they clomped up the back stairs instead. Just then I heard a door open. The sound came again. "Reina!" a voice cried out, then the door slammed. I threw my head up quickly and tried to lunge forward at the same time. The pain stopped me, and I cried loudly as the skin ripped deeply. Ryan's teeth had stayed where they were, but my neck had been shredded when I bolted upwards. But the pain was quickly forgotten. Phil! That was Phil, and he was calling my name. "Phil!" I barked, ignoring the shouts and the barks around me. Ryan shoved me back down again, the pain starting to burn from the gashes that were actually self-inflicted, since I had been the one to move. "Phil!" I let my wolf mind call out to him, but he was talking in two-legged language, so he wouldn't be able to hear me. I gave a quick bark towards the house. "Enough!" Ryan growled, and I whimpered. "I don't understand," I let myself think. "Why can't I see him? What's wrong?" My neck was on fire, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding wildly, and that nagging pull inside of me was pushing all sense out of my mind. I had to see Phil. I had to talk to him. Trax snorted, and I tried to move my eyes to see him, but I couldn't. My stomach tightened, and I felt my heart squeeze. Does he really hate me so much? Ryan's teeth eased a little. "Is that what you thought?" I whimpered again. It's the only thing that makes any sense. Whatever I did that night was so bad he hates me. I had to come here and make it right. What had I done that night? Ryan growled deeply and let go of my neck, snorting and giving himself a hard shake. "You are a pup. You will be punished for doing this. It's best you learn now." There was a series of barks from behind him, and he turned, growling again. He looked at Track, then at me. "Your two-legged ones are here." "This is pack business," Track barked hard, glaring towards the side of the house. I moaned and looked up. The wolves that were here trotted over and stood next to Ryan, making a wall between me and those that were coming. Track stayed next to me. Another series of barks, and Michaud, Martin, oh great, and my dad came running around the house. I was toast, complete with butter. When I saw my dad's face, I suddenly wished Ryan's teeth were back in my neck. He rushed over, and when the wolves moved enough, he knelt in front of me. His eyes ran over my body, and then he reached forward and touched my neck. When he pulled his hand back, it was covered in blood. "She's hurt," he snapped, quickly rubbing his hand in the grass. Michael walked over. "We have the car running. We can have her back at the manor in 10 minutes. I didn't want to know how fast they would have to drive to do that. Ryan growled. "Get someone on 2 legs out here to explain," he snapped. Track ran off into some bushes while Michael moved closer to me. Ryan stepped up next to me and leaned his neck over my head. "Wait," he told me, and I stayed still. Michael glared down at Ryan, and Ryan gave a low, warning growl. My dad looked at that alpha wolf. "Let her up this instant, or we're going to have some very serious problem here," he said, his voice so tight with anger I almost didn't recognize it. "I know he's your father, pup," came Ryan's thoughts, "but he has no understanding of your wolf or any wolf, no matter how hard he has tried." Ryan's thoughts were tainted with a disgust I didn't remember feeling from him before. No one moved. The yard was filled with the breathing of the few wolves, and the anger hung heavy through both sides. I could smell it as well as sense it. My eyes looked up at my dad. I had never seen him so mad. There had to be some way for me to explain. Where was Track? I went to turn my head, and Ryan growled, and I froze. Another long moment of silence. I gave a whimper, and my dad turned to Michael. "Pick her up, now," he raged, misunderstanding my sound for a plea for help. Michael lunged, and one of Ryan's wolves jumped in between us. The wolf lowered its front legs a little, and Michael lowered into a crouch. Just then, Track came running into the yard, wearing only a pair of sweatpants. "Hold up! Hang on!" he yelled, holding out his hands. "I'm taking my daughter home," my father hissed. Michael glared at the wolf between us. I turned towards Track. "I have to explain to them," I thought, and then grunted as Michael lunged, shoved his arms under my belly, and yanked me up. Vampires are crazy fast when they want to be. The wolves around Ryan stood tense, teeth bared and ready for whatever their leader ordered. Then a howl exploded from inside the house, and we all turned. It was a howl of pure agony and rage. My chest tightened with pain and sorrow. A whimper quivered through me in response. Who was in there, and why was Phil with him? I jerked as Ryan barked hard and Track nodded, turning to Michael. "Get her out of here, fast." Michael turned and ran with my massive form bouncing in his arms. There was a loud yelp inside the house, and then I heard things crashing and breaking. I tried to turn my head to see, but my bodyguard's massive form blocked the house from my view. "In the car, now," my dad hollered, and I was shoved into the back of the car. "No, you stay here," I heard my dad say. "You need someone to explain this to her," came Track's heated reply. There was a silence as I turned and jumped up onto the seat. I put my paws on the back of it and looked out as Track jumped in. He slammed the door shut, and he yelled at Michael to drive. I turned back, looking over the back seat. "What was that? What's happening?" I asked. Track put his hand on my muzzle and shoved me down. I snorted and looked at him, then yelped as the car sped away and almost dumped me on the floor. Track grabbed me and steadied me. Another howl rang out, and my ears picked up. I almost recognized it, but it was distorted, filled with a rage and pain so deep I couldn't put it to anything I had known. Then other howls joined in, filling the air with their mixed thoughts and drowning out the first one. Dozens of wolves cried out as we drove through the town at speeds that couldn't be safe, no matter how near immortal we were. Track looked at me, his eyes filled with something worse than anger. Disappointment. I lowered my head. Suddenly, the chivalrous act of begging Phil to forgive me didn't seem so chivalrous. It was stupid. Very, very stupid. Michael took a turn hard, and I yelped as I slid off the seat, landing on the floor with a thud. "Chill, man," Track yelled, reaching out to steady me. My dad turned, glaring over the seat. "She's bleeding, badly." "She's fine, it's just some tearing," Track growled, then he frowned. We were in a closed car with 2 full vampires, and I was bleeding. A lot. He swallowed hard and pulled me back up onto the seat, putting his arm around me protectively. "Is your blood going to be a problem for them?" he barely whispered into my ear. My ears perked up. Crap, I didn't think about that. "Is it?" he growled. My dad turned around, his eyes hard and locked on Track. "I won't understand that you only asked her that because you are concerned for her safety." I had never heard my dad talk in that tone, especially not to Track. The venom and anger in it made my skin crawl. I whimpered, and my dad looked at me. "That is my daughter. There is nothing in this world that could make me harm her." I reached my nose out, and my dad's eyes softened a bit. "My concern is that she's wounded. Werewolf or not, those wounds need to be dressed and looked after." Track gave a hard nod, and my dad reached his hand over the seat. I jumped down and then back up on the other seat so I was next to him. He smiled at me. "Don't look at me with those eyes, Reina. You're still in quite a lot of trouble." I lowered my head, and then my dad turned back around. Michael drove fast, but I no longer worried if the car would fall apart from the speed. I had bigger problems. And I'm going to stop there.